Hey guys, it's Darcy here again, and I'm here with my homie, my trainer, Tactix. I'm going to give you a quick intro so everyone gets to know you, and then I'm going to let you give yourself a little bit more. But I got to throw it out there. So this is my homie. We've been homies for years, and he's also my trainer. When we started working together, I don't know, like 240 or something like that, 230, somewhere in that range. And now I'm at a much lower place, and I was thinking recently, I was watching some producers talking about their health and being hurt, being in like a negative health place, and I really wanted to reach out and start a conversation. And Tactics is not just train me on the physical fitness of things, but also the health, mental health, balancing, meditation, a lot of stuff related to diet. That's why I'm known as the guy who walks around with one of these bottles, as you just saw him with 2 seconds ago. And just like taking care of yourself. He's a man with lots of credentials, many that I'm not going to remember perfectly, so that's where I'm going to transition smoothly over to him to say let people know what you're doing, and all the different types of things that you do.
Well, that was a pretty sweet segue, man. I gotta admit. Yeah, first and foremost, thank you for having me on here, man. This is an honor and a privilege, and it's been a privilege working with you. As Darcy mentioned, I'm a personal trainer. I'm also a fascial stretch therapist. Got to represent the FST brand as well. And I'm a movement specialist, so I specialize in ground-based movement, predominantly with animal flow, which is a ground-based movement system similar to yoga, except it's a little bit more dynamic. And I'm a holistic lifestyle coach as well, so dealing with holistic things across the board. So mind, body, spirit, those are my main focuses in pertaining to my clients. And yeah, that's me in a nutshell, man.
I mean, I know now, they know, so like and everyone knows. So the thing, I want to set the stage, right? So recently, a producer that I know posted like an Instagram story, and he had like a medical bracelet on, and he hadn't been taking care of himself. He burned himself out, and I reached out and I was chatting with him and whatnot, and this isn't the first time I've seen this, right? Like I've seen many times where different producers, either I know or, ones you follow that are bigger, they've pushed themselves too hard and then they end up in the hospital because of it. I've seen some that were in the hospital for long periods of time. There was one pretty well-known producer in the Toronto area that didn't know he had diabetes, and he pushed himself to a state, and then he was in the hospital for like what looked like at least a week, trying to recover. And so I really wanted to you and I talk about this often and a lot, but I wanted to, have this dialogue to start, being able to share with people about taking care of themselves. Not everyone's trying to be, like Vin Diesel out here and whatnot, but there are a lot of things that people are missing on day to day to take care of themselves. And, this is where I wanted to chat with you. So one of the first things I was thinking about was talking about first off, getting into the mental health of things. But an easy place to start is what is the flow state? As a producer, we'll say, oh, I'm in the zone and I was working for 5 hours. I didn't even realize the time. You call that the flow state. Some people call that a zone. Some people call that a vibe. What is that? You have more technical understanding of what that actually means.
Yeah, so actually I have a book on it that I'll show real quick here. So the book is called Flow, and it's by author Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, which is a long name to pronounce, but he's a psychologist, and he basically coined the term flow. And basically how he defines it is as it's the mental state of optimal performance or optimal experience, right? So flow in a sense is basically it's kind of like the push and pull of tension and relaxation, right? And how he breaks it down is he breaks it down into like a chart, and he kind of refers to it as like skill versus challenge, and the intersection between those two principles. So in that regard, it's more so like let's say, for example, in your field with producing, right? You're met with a particular challenge, right? But the challenge is, if the challenge is far exceeding your skill level, you're going to be met with a lot of high level of anxiety. But on the contrary, on the other side of the spectrum, if the challenge is below your skill level, like way below your skill level, you'll be met with boredom. So that flow state is kind of like the in between. So it's like an equal balance of tension and relaxation, or an equal balance or equal ratio of challenge and skill, with the challenge just exceeding your skill level just by like a very small margin. Because again, if the challenge is too high, then there's going to be too much tension, right? And then on the other side of the spectrum, if there's not enough challenge, you're too relaxed, right? So flow, in a sense, or how to get into flow, is basically that push and pull between tension and relaxation, and it can go across the board in all areas of life. So from fitness to making music, to art, to sex, like anything, right? And
yeah, I like how you threw that out there.
Yeah, I just throw that out. But yeah, so there's the 4 stages of flow. There's the struggle phase, there's the release phase, and then there's the flow state and the recovery phase, right? So with the struggle phase, this is when you're introduced to a new skill or a new challenge, or like in more specific in terms of like fitness, if you're trying to set a new PR or whatever, it's that struggling phase where you're like in a high level of anxiety. Then you have to get into that release stage where, for example, let's say you're working on a beat and like you're trying to figure it out, like your mind is very analytical in that state, and you're trying to formulate stuff, but you're struggling with something, right? So this is the struggle phase, which is important in all aspects, whether it's in beat making, whether it's in art, whatever the case may be. And then there's the release stage where you actually detach yourself from that struggle phase momentarily, and you kind of shift gears into something completely different to give your brain kind of a rest and to relax a little bit. You keep doing this, and you keep experiencing this push and pull, this back and forth between the struggle or the tension and relaxation. And then eventually you're going to find that you're going to come to that sweet spot. And some people, like you said, refer to it as like you're in the zone, or like some yogis in the yoga community call it like the transcendental state. If you're an anime fan, then it's you going Super Saiyan in the gym kind of thing. So yeah, that's pretty much what flow is.
So like a scenario for like a producer is like, okay, so someone's trying to learn a new technique. Like I'm going to use the 808, right? They're trying to do something new with the 808, like slide or something, or glide. And they are struggling with it. They take a break, then they go back into it. They take a break, they go back into it. And that kind of gets them into that flow state. And people who probably practice more, end up being able to get into that better. But there's something you said though, like, so obviously when someone's taking a challenge, it's like too easy for them, they're not going to feel it. But sometimes people will get into that state. Let's say they get into a recording studio, they've never really been in one before, and they realize there's gear there that they've never interacted with, they don't understand how it works, and they got an artist with them, and now their anxiety is going through the roof. And maybe this person is in multiple stages where they're in that kind of anxiety state often, right? What are your thoughts, and like what do you suggest for people who are in these anxiety states? Like, how do they go about handling them? Because these things don't just like, sometimes they're momentary, right, and they go away, but sometimes it's constant, right? The pressures of like, oh, I gotta succeed, the pressure, I gotta, these people are working harder than me and I gotta work hard. And sometimes that's positive, but sometimes that's anxiety driven. Like, so what does that effect have on people? What do you tell people when they're dealing with that on a regular?
It's a very good question. So again, going back to the tension and relaxation, you can't get into flow if you're too tense, and you can't get into flow if you're too relaxed, right? So there's that matter of finding that sweet spot, because when you're in that tense anxiety stage, what's happening is that your body is releasing a lot of your body is releasing these specific neurotransmitters known as cortisol, right, and adrenaline, right? And when this happens, it's basically stressing your nervous system, right? Your brain waves are actually in beta, so there's multiple brain waves, and so beta is like the highest level of your brain waves. It means that your brain waves are really, really fast, and then the one lower than that is I think it's beta, and then it's alpha, then it's theta, and then it's delta. So alpha is more so that it's kind of like that state where you're kind of like in a daydreaming kind of trance, almost like you're still conscious to a certain degree, but you're almost kind of like drifting off. It's like when you're watching a boring lecture and your brain kind of like drifts off and you start thinking of other stuff. That's you in like alpha. Your brain waves have now slowed down. You're less analytical and you're more into you're kind of like bypassing your conscious mind and tapping into your subconscious mind.
So
and
like
then
if I want to like translate that for people, like, so like beta is like, when I'm in the like, say I'm using my software, we've worked on music together. You see me, you come over and I'm just like moving like, 18 things like real fast and whatever. That's like a beta phase, right?
Beta phase,
everything's, my brain's firing fast and I'm able to keep up with it. And then, like you said, the alpha phase is like, like falling asleep but kind of awake at the same time.
Yeah, you're a little bit more relaxed. You're less analytical. You're less focused on the outer world and you're more into your internal world. And I know it sounds a little woo-woo, but yeah, go on.
This brings up a question. Is alpha phase also similar to, now I asked this because I'm not a person who uses these and I don't think you are as well, but is alpha phase similar to what people get when they're like buzzed and high and shit like that?
I feel like that would be more so you're on the cusp of like alpha theta, because theta is more so the it's more of a meditative transcendental state that you get into. So it's a level below theta, and this is usually where memories are stored, and this is where like people kind of go into that meditative trance-like state. So yeah, I think more so if you were high predominantly, then you'd be more in like lower theta levels, and then delta is pretty much like unconsciousness, where you're like in deep sleep, right? So anyway, my point is, and we'll go back to that later because I know you probably have like questions regarding sleep and all that stuff, but going back to your original question in terms of like what a person can do, as simple as it is, but I'm sure you can appreciate this because you being in music and having an understanding of sounds and everything, and breath work. Breath work is very important when it comes to that kind of stuff, because when you're anxious, like if you can think back to a time when you were really stressed out or when you were really anxious, what happens to your breathing? Your breathing gets very shallow, right? You start breathing more through your chest because you're pent up, you're a lot more tense, right? When you breathe with a more relaxed kind of method in terms of your pattern, your breathing is more deeper. It's more diaphragmatic, so coming from the belly, and you're a lot more relaxed. And this actually triggers your parasympathetic state, which is your rest and digest. We've all probably heard of the fight or flight response, which is our stress response. This is known as our sympathetic nervous system. And so when we're highly anxious or under a great degree of stress, whether we're in danger or we're just nervous or whatever the case may be, our sympathetic nervous system kicks in. We get stressed. We start breathing more shallow. That shallow breathing then comes into a cyclical pattern, and it starts to elicit the sympathetic nervous system even more. Then once that triggers, you start going back into your shallow breathing, and it's just a cyclical pattern that keeps on happening, right? But when we start to breathe with more conscious control and slow down our breathing, we start to kind of down-regulate our nervous system, and this starts to kind of gets us back to like a nice solid baseline where we're in our rest and digest system.
So someone's like, they're having anxiety, they're stressing, what kind of breathing would somebody do? Now, obviously not everyone's going to be like at a yogi kind of level of breathing.
Yeah.
So what is somebody who, the only kind of breathing they know is the kind that they were born with,
Yeah. Well, I mean, we were born with proper breathing mechanics. And then as we age, as we get older, we start to develop that poor breathing pattern of breathing more shallow through our chest, right? So actually, when you're born, you already have this innate ability to breathe properly. Like if you analyze or observe the way babies naturally breathe, they breathe with like their belly expanded, like because they just know how to do that. Like Ido Portal says, like babies are closest to the source, and that's kind of what he means in the sense of like nobody teaches a baby how to breathe or how to squat properly or anything like that. They just know, right? And then we lose that pattern over time. But in regards to your question, so when you're inhaling, you're actually triggering your sympathetic nervous system, and then when you exhale, you're triggering your parasympathetic nervous system. So what does that tell you? You have to lengthen the exhale, right? So you inhale like how you normally would, but then just draw out the exhale, making it long, like a little bit longer. So when you inhale, you breathe in nice and deep, you expand your belly, feel your belly, kind of like a 3D breath in a sense, where you're not just expanding your belly, but feeling the rib cage expand as well. So you're basically breathing through your entire torso. So you inhale, and then you just lengthen the exhale. So you just...
You know what's interesting about this? Now all my producers might know this, depending on their experience being an artist or, you know, being in a chorus or something like that. But a good singer knows to breathe with their diaphragm. And something I also work with sometimes with rappers, where, you know, I can tell they're straining their voice. It's like to try to get them to like learn how to breathe their diaphragm, because it opens up the actual sound of their voice, makes their voice sound bigger and thicker, and it's a great thing for recording. But it's the same thing we're talking about right now. It's like learning how to breathe through your diaphragm, breathe through your stomach to help with your anxiety is the same skill that you would want to use on the mic, ironically.
Yeah.
So you said something quite a ways earlier about cortisol, right?
Yeah.
The stress, is it the stress hormone? Am I remembering that correctly?
Yeah.
And, you know, I know that like if you're constant releasing a stress hormone, you know, that has serious negative implications on your body over time. Can you talk more about that? Because that's something I feel like, you know, if I'm remembering correctly from your teachings to me, that, you know, if someone is like not sleeping properly all the time and whatnot, they're putting a lot of stress on their body. What are the effects that this has? And then like we can dive into things like we were talking about before about sleep and all that other kind of stuff. Yeah.
So there's a saying that goes, stress is a silent killer, right? Because you don't usually, it has a slow visual impact on the body. Like you don't notice it right away. It's something that happens gradually, right? So like something as simple as, you know, actually let me backtrack. So when it comes to stress, right? From an evolutionary standpoint, like stress isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's kind of like a survival mechanism for us. So going back to that fight or flight response, or the parasympathetic nervous system, the rest and digest, I don't want you to look at it as one being bad or evil and the other one being really good. It's a matter of, it's all about balance, right? Balancing the two, because the whole sole purpose of the fight or flight response is to ward off danger. Like it's an alert system in our body, right? It helps us to fend off danger or whatever. So what happens is when we're stressed out, all of the blood rushes from our organs to our extremities to help us either fight or run, essentially, right? So when that happens, it's beneficial in the sense of if we're in danger, like back in the day, like in the Paleolithic era, if you encountered a saber-toothed tiger, you needed that fight or flight response to help protect you, like in the event that you needed to run or you need to fight for your life, kind of thing, right?
Hey, if you run into a pit bull on the wrong end of a alleyway, you still need that right now.
Right? Yeah, exactly, right. But I mean, like that, like so when that happens, right? So a lot of your internal systems, like they shut down, like all the things that aren't necessary for that particular situation gets shut down. So like basically
like you're not having to go to the bathroom,
right? Yeah, like that running. Like that's not really a necessary thing for you, right? So like you're like, so that system shuts down, right? But the thing is, as we kind of evolved in society, like the stress response and all the things that happen as a result of the stress, they're still very prevalent, right? So all of those functions still get nullified when you're under stress. So like if you're stuck in traffic and someone cuts you off or something like that, and you get all stressed out and you're like all angry or whatever, and like you start to trigger your sympathetic nervous system, it's the same physiological reaction that you're going to get if you were to encounter a pit bull or like someone like pulled a gun on you or something. Like it's the same kind of response. And the problem with that is that we're we're very high strung in today's society now. We're always in traffic. We're always dealing with some kind of stress, whether it's from financial stress or stress from work or stress from our families or stress from our relationships, right? It's always this influx of like stressful situations that are happening, that are occurring, and that are affecting our bodies on a regular basis, right? And so if we compare the stress that we deal with now versus the stress that the Paleolithic man dealt with, you know, we outweigh that a whole lot more, right? Because you know what I mean? Like they lived in a more dangerous time and a dangerous era, but you know, we have like so much access to excess, and like there's so many different things that can stress us out in today's society compared to the Paleolithic era, right? So that's the problem for today, right? Where it's like we're like when these functions, like when our internal systems stop functioning the way they're supposed to because of stress, over time that's going to take a toll on our body and tax our nervous system and just cause a whole bunch of illnesses, inflammation, and you know, diseases and things of that nature, right? So that's why they say stress is a silent killer, because you might think, oh yeah, it was just some bullshit that I dealt with in traffic, you know, it's not a big deal, I was stressed out for a little bit. But when you're doing that every single day, over time that's going to add up. So
yeah. So is one of those things like I'm going to like lead in something if I'm on the right path here, but is one of those things staying up super late?
Absolutely, yeah.
So
because
go on.
Yeah, no.
So I want to paint a scenario, but I also want to paint it with some preface. So a lot of us making music, right, will stay up late. You know, you know very well that I've stayed up late a number of times. Yeah. you told me go to bed earlier. And so, you know, sometimes you're in the studio, right? You're with an artist or whatever. You're gonna work to like might start at 11, might finish at 6 a.m. And that is a necessary hustle and necessary grind. And by all means, I want to start this preface by saying I'm not saying nothing about don't do those things, those grinds, those sacrifices that are necessary. Absolutely. But the consistent behavior of always being up late, for instance, let's say when you don't have these extra big opportunity type sacrifices, like the everyday where you're just kind of at home and grinding, the person's consistently 3 a.m., 4 a.m., 3 a.m., 4 a.m., right? What is that doing to the body? And what are some things, like obviously trying to go to bed earlier is something people can do, but for people who, you know, consistently maybe have a routine right now where they have to grind really late often, what should they be doing to try and, you know, lessen the burden on the body, I guess?
Right. Good question. So in a perfect world, we should all be rising and falling with the sun, right? So, you know, just to kind of align with our circadian rhythm, that's not always realistic for a lot of people, especially if you're a person that works super late and everything. I mean, again, in a perfect world, that would be the most ideal situation for you if you want to try to like ward off a lot of illnesses and inflammation in the body. That's a really, really good place to start in terms of just enhancing and improving your overall sleep quality. But for those people who can't, like yourself or like people in the music producing or the music industry who kind of have to go through that hustle of like, you know, staying up super late and working and whatnot. The most important thing I would say, if you can't go to bed at a reasonable hour, so like that being like 10:30 or like at least at the latest 10:30, then the next best thing would just be making sure that one, you have a consistent sleep schedule. So like your sleep schedule isn't like so sporadic where like one day you're going to bed at like 12, and then another day you're going to bed at like 3 a.m. and then another day it's like 5 a.m. Like it's just so irregular. Your brain and your body doesn't know when to down regulate and to shut down because it's so confused. And then what happens is, so around about 10 o'clock or 10:30, I believe, is when your body starts to secrete melatonin, which is your sleep hormone, right? But what happens is if you start to get exposed to that blue light, right, what happens is your brain now thinks that it's daylight and will switch from melatonin to cortisol, which is the stress hormone. So now you're accumulating stress when you should be down regulating and you should be sleeping at night. So now it makes it harder for you to not only fall asleep, but to get good quality sleep, right? So that's another thing, right? So
I want to jump on one thing you said there. That blue light you're talking about.
Yeah.
I'm gonna see if this shows up on my phone. You know, on your iPhones, I can't really see this right now, but those like night shift modes that make your phone and your Macs and your PCs. I'm thinking the PCs have it. That makes them a little yellow. Yeah. Those were actually released because like Apple and a bunch of these other companies started recognizing that blue light problem. And so to help with people going to bed, they brought in those features that make your computer become yellow at the time that you should be going to bed, and more yellow. And there's apps that can make it super yellow, like that one Flux, which I hated how yellow it got. It's like your screen was just like a big yellow blur. But as a pro tip for those who you know have turned those features off on your phone, rethink it. Think about putting that back on, that night shift, so that your stuff is yellow. So that way, you know, as you're making a beat into like 11:30 at night, you're like, all right, I'm going to go to bed at 12. That you're not pumping bright blue light into your face, and then it's going to make it harder for you to go to sleep. Yeah, it'll be easier if you have that yellow light. So.
Yeah, another option also is getting blue light blocking glasses. So these are the things that I wear here. I wear these every night at like 10:30, although, well, actually, no, it's not 10:30 yet. So I wear these. There's also the other funky looking ones that look more like construction glasses, but they're like really, really orange. These are the first pair that I got. And these are the ones that I usually will wear at night. And then these are the ones that I'll wear if I have to work late and I can't meet my my bedtime specifically, so I'll just wear these and work on my computer. So I bought these on Amazon. They're really cheap. They're like $20, but another good tool for you to use if you're making beats. This one, the tint is very light, so you can't like when you wear them, they look like regular glasses. Like they don't actually they filter the blue light, but they don't add that orange tinge and like disrupt your workflow or whatever. Like these ones will
take the mic out with them.
Yeah, these ones will definitely change like the they'll block pretty much everything. So I wouldn't recommend this if you want something to like work with still, like if you're doing like beats like really late at night. This is something more so if you're just like up and you're reading or whatever the case may be, then you want to rock one of those. But
the first ones look better, especially if you're in a studio with a client.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, they're more fashionable for sure.
The second ones, I feel like someone's gonna be like, "Yo, where'd you get those? Your granddad?"
Yeah, I definitely want to rock those outside of my house. Like I've never worn them outdoors, but they're handy as well too, because they cover more of the eyes as well too. So it's good in that regard.
We're saying you got options, but be smart about which one.
Yeah. The time and place.
So it's good and ideal to try to get a consistent pattern, right? But like for instance, so I keep a fairly consistent pattern. But for instance, this week I got a studio session tomorrow where I'm starting at 8 p.m. going to midnight, so which means I'm getting home at like 12:30. Right? Yeah. Maybe 1 probably by the time we're done chatting and stuff as we're leaving the studio.
That's when you get the glasses, bro.
I'm with you on that. I'm going to be in the studio like, do they have yellow filter? So in that scenario where, okay, let's say someone's they hear this, they're like, all right, I'm going to try and change. I'm going to at least the days I can control, as in like I don't have client work or whatever. I'm going to go to bed at a specific time. But there are times where it's going to be irregular, right? It's then they can't nail down a perfect routine. It's just not the life that they're in. So what should they do to try and compensate on the days that things are off, right? Like obviously, the easy thing to say is, I'm guessing, sleep more that day, like sleep in, like everybody does. But is that really a good thing? And is there other things people should be thinking about?
So another kind of life hack that you can implement into your sleep schedule, not ideal for like if it's so sporadic, like, you know, so I say this very loosely, but the main objective is getting good quality sleep. And how you do that is you make sure that you complete your sleep cycle. So you're like throughout the night, you go through about 4 or 5 sleep cycles that consist of 4 or 5 stages, if I'm not mistaken. I don't remember exactly, but there's apps that you can kind of download onto your phone, and it'll tell you the ideal time for you to go to bed and the ideal time for you to wake up based off of when you went to bed. So that way you can wake up during your last completed cycle. Because if you wake up in the middle of a full sleep cycle, that's when you start to feel groggy and like very fatigued, and like, you know, you start resorting to like energy drinks and like caffeinated stuff and all that kind of stuff, right? Just to kind of get you through the day. If you complete your cycles, like, you know, and, you know, let's say you only have, you know, 5 hours of sleep, but they're like full quality, like really good quality sleep, then it's usually going to help to get you through the day. And, you know, it's not the most ideal because you still need a certain amount of hours to repair your body and repair your brain and everything. But if you can go to bed, if you can map the time that you're supposed to go to bed, the perfect time, that will ensure that you will complete all of those cycles within those hours that you're asleep, then that's another way that can help you get the good quality sleep that you need.
Yeah, I've used those apps before, and the way that they tend to work is like, let's say it's like you just got home, it's 2:30 in the morning, and you go, okay, I'm going to go to bed. It'll suggest the next time to start going to bed. So it might say, go to bed at 2:43. Like you might be like, oh, I'm going to go to bed at 2:35. It's like, no, go to bed at 2:43.
Yeah.
And then it'll tell you exactly like how many rhythms or whatever you're saying you can get by each. Like it'll suggest, okay, you can wake up in 6 hours, 7 hours, or this period of time, and it'll basically tell you how many cycles you're going to get.
Yeah.
And so essentially what we're saying here is like, one, try to get a consistent schedule for the days you can control, and for the days that you can't control, like in general, it's good to use this app, but like definitely be using an app to help suggest when you should go to bed and when you should wake up, so that you don't wake up right in the middle of deep sleep where your body's doing the most benefit for your brain, and your body's getting the most repair, and then you wake up in the middle of it because you just set your alarm and it hurts you. You'd be better off waking up maybe 30 minutes earlier. Yeah, you'll be tired, but you'll actually have done more benefit for your body.
Yeah.
And maybe you have to take a micro nap somewhere in the day, but you would have been better off waking up 15, 20 minutes earlier or 15, 20 minutes later, depending on your life schedule. So,
absolutely. Yeah.
So you mentioned, like, you know, what people are going to start using energy drinks and, you know, drinking Mountain Dew, and they're in the studio and, you know, like the studio that I'm going to, like, they got a vending machine. I mean, they got Tic-Tacs and they got like Doritos, you know, and I think they might have they have a lot of guitar picks also in a vending machine, but they don't seem to have as many healthy options. So, what is some stuff that people could start doing? These producers, these artists out here, what could they start thinking about in terms of food? And before you say anything, I'm going to make one recommendation because I know this is the best recommendation I can give. Get yourself a giant bottle and then fill it with water. At least 1.5 liters, but 2 liters. The thing I love about these things is once you fill one of these, you know how much you've drunk so far in the day.
Yeah.
Because, you know, you'll get like a small glass, like something like this. This is my protein shake, by the way. It looks messed up now. But you get a small glass like that and you forget to fill it up. With this, you never forget to fill it up because it's usually gigantic and, you know.
Absolutely, yeah.
But what else what other things people should be doing, thinking about when they're having this type of lifestyle?
So the main thing is to simplify your life the best you can, right? Like the more complex something is, or the more work a person has to do initially off the bat, the harder it is for them to sustain consistency, right? So starting off small and just kind of like doing what you can to prepare your own meals, like bring your own meals if you can, healthier options. So there are even some healthier fast food options, you know, like Subway has some really good options. You know, bringing almonds, like any kinds of nuts or anything like that are also good. If you have the money, I would also for this particular case, recommend doing like a meal prepping service. So you invest a little bit more money in terms of like your groceries or whatever, and you kind of put it into this meals prepping service, and you basically can just fill out your order. And like they have a lot of really good meals, generally along the lines of like the bodybuilding type stuff, but then they also have like other options depending on where you go. But that's also a good option as well.
I also, for those producers that are like 20 and living at home, your meal prepping services, talk to your parents, but just saying.
This is true too. Yeah. Yeah. Why not? Utilize any resources you have. But I mean, yeah, meal prepping is good too, because it's like, it saves you time, because literally all you're doing is you're buying the stuff, and all you have to do is just put it in the microwave, and then it's good to go. And it's a healthier option. It's a healthier alternative, and it beats just snacking on Tic Tacs and Doritos.
And something that like, I'm trying to think how to phrase this, but like, so you're in the studio late, right? Or let's say you're in the studio during the day, but you've got long hours, right? And that stuff's exhausting. I've learned, I had a nutritionist back in the day, and even talking with you as well, who educated me that like, like every day human beings tend to get tired around 3:00. And I was curious as to why that was. And I was informed, well, it's because your blood sugar drops. And then what do most people do? They either get a coffee with a bunch of sugar in it, or they go get like a chocolate bar with a bunch of sugar in it. And it gives them a spike, but then it gives them a crash. And I was informed that, the better thing to do is get protein, right? And to sustain your energy. What are some of the things, like, let's say, things that people can buy when they're out? Right? Let's say they have a meal prep. What are things that people can buy that helps them sustain their energy? Because obviously, like, it feels good to get McDonald's in the middle of an 8-hour recording session, but then you end up being real sluggish by hour 7 because, in hour 5 you ate some McDonald's. So what are some alternatives they should be thinking about, fast food type things or whatnot when they're out, that are going to do a better job of keeping their energy up?
Yeah, honestly, to be honest, I think the main problem is that a lot of people skip breakfast, and I understand it. Like, I'm not always about eating breakfast, because like I kind of fluctuate between eating breakfast and then intermittent fasting, which is what I have you currently doing right now. So, but for the average person who's not focused on leaning out and doesn't care about intermittent fasting or whatever, I would always recommend starting the day off with a nice hearty breakfast, right? A lot of the times what happens is people, they kind of eat in like a upside down triangle type of thing, where they eat like a small meal or next to nothing early in the day. And then by the time like it gets later in the day, it starts to kind of taper off, and the larger meals are at the end, and that's when you start to get a little bit more sluggish, right? I would suggest you eat it kind of like majority of your calories you get in like early in the day, and then it tapers off throughout the evening, right? So like you get your big meals early in the day, and then you have like small snacks in between to help to sustain your energy levels and to keep you satiated throughout the day. And yes, you were right about the protein, because the protein is also going to help to keep you more satiated. In terms of like fast food options, I know I can't suggest anything specific because I don't really eat a lot of fast food unless it's like on my cheat day. And then if it's on my cheat day, I'm not really concerned about like the health benefits. But I know a lot more fast food restaurants are kind of being more cognizant of their healthier options. So they're adding more salads and more healthy alternatives to their fast food options and stuff like that. So chances are, majority of the places that you go, like I think even McDonald's, I haven't set foot in a McDonald's in years, but I think even McDonald's has like some healthier alternatives as well. But as a coach, I'm not, I don't know if I'm really ready to, bring people to McDonald's just yet, kind of thing. But yeah, like I mean,
I feel you. I mean, like you mentioned, Subway is something to look at. And
Teriyaki Experience is great too. I love that place. That's a good place. You can get good stuff at like Burrito Boys. Where else? What's that other place? Not Burrito Boys, but it's another. Anyway, I can't remember the name of it, but yeah, there's like, just if you just do a little bit of research, you can find restaurants that have healthier alternatives. I mean, what's shit for your body and what's not, right? I mean, it's not rocket science. I mean, like we all know, like, burgers and pizza and all that kind of stuff isn't going to be self-sustaining and contributing to high energy levels, right? So, you got to just kind of got to be smart about it and make healthier decisions.
Yeah, 100%. When you said you're hating on the burgers there, but then you said pizza, and I'm like, all right, you love pizza, I love burgers. I was like, don't be hating on burgers. Yeah, no, I had a thought that was a question I was going to follow up with, and now I forgot because you said burgers and you threw me off.
My bad.
It's all good. But overall, I feel like people just need to like. Oh, I remember what I was going to say. For food options, I'm a big fan of shawarma salads, but
yeah, shawarma is another good place. Yeah.
The one reason I like it is because I've been on a more stricter diet for last few years now, and one thing that bugs me is when you go somewhere and you're like, yeah, can I just like, I don't want to get carbs, right? Like I don't want to get like rice or whatever. So I'm like, all right, can I get this? And I just want all vegetables. And they'll be like, oh, all vegetables, you don't want rice? And I'll be like, no. And then they'll give me like 2 more vegetables. And I'm like, you want me to pay more money than if I were to not get the rice to get 2 more vegetables, like 2 broccoli, right? Whereas like when I go like get something like a shawarma, the one thing I like and get as a salad thing I like about that place is like I don't have to say like, can you keep this out and that out? They actually just give me a lot of vegetables and meat, and I'm like, yeah. I feel like we covered quite a few things, and I'm trying to think if there's anything I'm like missing. Anything that I didn't ask questions of that you feel is beneficial that people need to know that we just haven't like covered at all.
I mean, we kind of touched on the whole breathing aspect and how important that is, and in addition to that, I think me being who I am, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention movement as well. Yeah. One of my favorite underrated movies is World War Z. Mm-hmm. And there's a line in that movie where Brad Pitt's character says, movement is life. And that's something that's always resonated with me ever since I heard that. Movement, not in the sense of like you have to lift a shit ton of weight or, run a marathon or anything like that. It's just just moving your body. I mean, like when we're just kind of stationary, sedentary, and sitting all day kind of thing, like everything gets stagnant, energy doesn't flow properly. And then this also puts a lot of stress on our body. We get tight and restricted in our muscles and in our joints. And this actually makes us age a lot faster and makes us feel more lethargic and stuff. Movement is essentially life, right? So the more you move, the more you're lubricating your body. And we were meant as human beings, we were meant to move and move often, right? And, being in the profession that you guys are in as, music producers, I understand that, you're kind of, confined to your station or whatever the case may be, and you're working long hours and whatnot. But I think you'd have a lot more longevity in your business and just in life if you just implemented the breath work, the diet, but more so the movement. And like, take frequent breaks whenever you can. I know sometimes when you're in the zone, it's hard to kind of just pull away. But when there's like a lull in your sessions, just get up and just move, do some stretches, like, do jumping jacks, do something, just get your body moving, because it'll benefit you in the long run in terms of like enhancing your energy levels. I'm telling you.
Yeah, actually, I'm glad you brought that up, because there's a couple of things that is also, I like to use movement and something to keep in mind. So one, exactly what Tactix said, like when there's a lull in the recording session, or you're working on your beat and you're just like, now you've stuck in that loop where you just can't think of new ideas, get up, move around. But a couple other ones. So one, Illmind once talked about that, stand up when you make beats, at least like throughout the process, because the beat should make you want to move, right? Mm-hmm. Especially if it's like a dance or, a hard rap beat that's got a vibe, and you should get up and see if it makes you want to like move the way you want it to make you move, right? Like, mm-hmm. If that joint wants to make you, like ante up, get that, phone, right? And that you want that like hard energy, get up. And if you don't feel like while you're producing, you fully have the energy, one, you'll stand up and you'll be moving to get your body going. But two, then you'll also be like, oh, it's missing this, and go back and put it in the beat and then get back up and then be like, is it giving me the energy yet?
Yeah.
No, I'll go back and then go back and forth. Another one, in the recording session, for instance, obviously it's good to get up when, the artist isn't recording and to take a break and move. But here's another little pro tip that I like to use sometimes. So artists sometimes, they're recording, doing multiple takes, maybe they're feeling kind of sluggish. It's good to get up and get that artist amped, right? So get them pumped. So get them to do jumping jacks. And here's the thing. If you do it with them, one, you're getting the movement in, and two, you get a little competitiveness, right? Like the artist is like kind of whatever. And you're like, all right, let's just do this. And you get up and you start moving all kind of crazy. And they're like, what? And then you're like, no, get it going. And you get them all hyped and they start moving. And then you get them to calm down for 2 seconds so they control their breath, and you're like, all right, get on the mic, and then you go sit back down and do your thing. It's a way to incorporate movement, but these are ways in which you directly benefit the output of the work that you're doing as well. So a way to incorporate, what Tactix is saying with the actual profession of what you're doing. So I'm glad you hit on that one. I didn't even put that one in my notes.
Well, I'm the movement guy, man. So I had to throw that in there, man, because that's a big part of who I am and what I do.
Yeah. And I mean, let me end on one more thing. Peacefulness, right? So all this stuff, you're grinding really hard, and I feel like peacefulness is something that is important to balance against all the grind, right? It's very easy to stay in a constant state. You get all the motivational videos, you get all the pressures, you get everything else to telling you gotta grind. But something I love that Gary Vee had been saying a lot in the last couple of years, people would be like, how much do you sleep? And he's like, oh, I get lots of sleep. I love sleep. He's like, it's not about what you do with when you sleep, it's about what you do when you're awake, right? Like everything he's talking about is not about sleep, right? But peacefulness in life, right? Like what are some things people can do to balance? Because as much as it's good to be on that grind, it's sometimes you don't get to see when you're grinding so hard that you might be taxing yourself. You don't get to see that. And the whole thing I'm talking about from the very beginning, the producer who posts a picture that he's, in the hospital because he burnt himself out, what's something that he could do to have some peacefulness so he can get that, perspective that goes, okay, I've been grinding really hard last few weeks, but I can see now I'm pushing myself. So like to get him into that state, what's something he could do?
Well, doing a self-assessment, just kind of like what you just did just now, where you're like, I've been grinding for so long, and like I think I need some time to kind of just relax and unwind. It goes back to that flow state. You can't be in flow if you're too high strung and too anxious, right? And on the contrary, you can't get into flow if you're too relaxed. There's that push and pull between tension and relaxation. So remembering that a lot of the times we're so into that hustle mode and like that grind, and then like we just want to go, and we forget that we also need to relax. We also need to chill, right? You can't get into flow if you're on one side of the spectrum or the other, right? So you have to find that equilibrium, that balance, right? And then sleep, I think, is a big component of that as well. Like I equate that to like kind of like, so like deep sleep means equates to deep clean in terms of the brain, right? So when we're in beta and like throughout the day, our brain is like functioning, it's analyzing everything, and it collects a lot of toxins and all that kind of stuff, right? And when we sleep, especially when we're in deep sleep, in that delta state, our brain goes through this almost kind of like this brainwashing in a sense, where it basically the cerebral fluid kind of flushes out all the toxins from the day and basically restores everything. So it's kind of like a sponge in the sense of like you soak a dry sponge in water, and the sponge represents your brain, and the water represents all the information that you've acquired, all the data that you've acquired from that day. But when you don't sleep, that water has nowhere to go, and so it stays there. And then, as we know, when water sits for a long time, it becomes stale, right? And that's kind of how your brain works, in the sense of like, if you're staying up all night or you're not getting enough sleep, you're not flushing, you're not squeezing the sponge and flushing that out into I guess your cup, in a sense of like consolidation. It's just collecting there, and over time, it's just your brain is just really heavy, full of all those toxins and all that water and stuff, right? So when you go to sleep and you get into that deep sleep, it's you flushing that, squeezing the sponge to make room for new information for the next day, right? And so that's why it's so important for that. And it also helps in terms of like your emotional well-being, because if you have a lot of stuff on your mind and you're not getting enough sleep, then that's going to affect you mentally. It's going to affect you emotionally. So keeping that in mind in terms of like why, this is why I stress the importance of sleep, because sleep is like the foundation of everything. It's how you recover, right? If you're not sleeping, you're not getting gains in the gym, right? If you're not eating well, you're not getting gains in the gym. It's the same thing with information or like skill acquisition, right? So in addition to that, the last thing I would say is, in addition to everything that we just said, is meditation. Meditation has been a big part of my life. Meditation doesn't have to be this woo-woo, airy-fairy type of thing. It can be as simple as just like spending at least like 5 minutes and just focusing on your breath, like closing your eyes, tuning out the external world, because the external world is part of what's contributing to your stress a lot of the time. So if we can just go inward into ourselves and just drown out all the excess noise and just focus on our breathing for at least 5 minutes and just kind of like clear our head, then that can kind of bring us back to homeostasis, could bring us back to a baseline level of just peacefulness. Right. So, yeah.
I want to share a quick story on meditation, because once I had this stressful thing that was going on, some personal stuff, right? And I had to make this. I got all this people saying, do this, do that, do this, do that, and I couldn't think. Like, it was so much that, like, so many thoughts going through my head I couldn't process, and I was just like anxiety. Mm-hmm. So I decided, I'm like, all right, I'm gonna meditate. I never really meditated that much in my life, and so I get an app and I put that thing on, say 10 minutes, and I'm like, I'm not really sure what meditation is at the time, and I realized as I'm doing it, it's like just literally focusing on your breath to the point of shutting off your brain, just to like not just stop thinking. Every time you think about something, don't bring your brain back to your breath, so that you can like shut the world out. And then the thing was, after the 10 minutes, after I got through it and figured it out, and of course it's like my first time, so the 10 minutes felt like 25 minutes. Like it really felt like a lot. The thing was, is once I was done the meditation, it was done, I stood up and I knew exactly what I was going to do with my problem, because the thing was, is that like I was having too many other people and societies influencing my thought process, and I was trying to account for everybody else's opinion instead of just taking my own. So once I woke up, I was like, that's what I want. I was like, or not woke up, but like got out of the state. I was like, immediately like, that's what I want. And it was very clear to me. So.
Well, because going back to the brainwaves and like how the brainwaves work, like when you're in alpha, which is the level below beta, alpha is where creativity happens, right? It's where, because you're in that process of downregulating those brain waves, where, because when you're in beta, you're analyzing everything, whether it's like stress from work or girlfriend or whatever the case may be. So when we downregulate and we slow down our brain waves through meditation and through the breath work, and we go down those levels of alpha, which is like creativity, where creativity happens, and then even more so when we go into theta, this is our brain during flow. So when we're in that flow state, a lot of people think that with when you're in flow, or when you're in that flow state, your brain is analyzing everything and it's like functioning at like super high speeds. No, it's actually the opposite. You're the part of your brain that is responsible, like your prefrontal cortex, which is like your executive function that's responsible for communication and all that kind of stuff, that actually gets turned off, and your brain slows down, and you're just in this flow state of like autonomy, right? Where like everything is like, you're just like, it's like you're super sane, like everything just kind of happens naturally, right? And so that, like, the best way to get into flow is just by meditation, or by tapping into the challenge skill ratio, where everything just kind of seamlessly like flows together, for lack of a better word, right? So that's why meditation is so effective, because what happens is you go from beta, which is you overanalyzing everything, and then slowing down your brain waves and going from that conscious mind to bypassing your analytical mind to going into your subconscious mind, which equates for 95% of everything that we do, right? So when we get into that, we can have more control over, like, the things that we want out of life. So like this, like for example, when you got your ideas and like you could figure out everything, it was you stopped operating from your prefrontal cortex or your conscious mind, and you started to allow your creative mind to take more control over that. And that was just through the process of slowing down your brain waves, right? And so this is again why meditation is so effective.
Yeah, absolutely. I gotta say thank you for dropping all of these gems, all of this knowledge, because I find it's very beneficial, and I'm hoping that everybody who watches this finds this very beneficial. So to anybody who does watch this, please comment or send me a DM and ask your questions about this kind of stuff, because I'd love to do this again and go into this in to answer specific people's, like, this is what I'm doing in my lifestyle. What do I do? X, Y, Z, right? So, but yeah, Tactix, appreciate you, homie, for coming out and,
Thank you, man.
dropping all of this. And yep, that's it, guys. We out.